Gee, Stash, here we are after a week's break. This is C.A.M.P Chain Abstraction Master Panel, episode 8. It's a bonus episode. It's been an epic series. We've had some master projects on, but very, very excited for today's episode. So we have Ark, who is building rapidly in the chain abstraction space and combining two of our favorite concepts, modularity and omni-chain designs, which of course is the topic of today's discussion. On the call, we have our CEO from SEDA, Peter, and representing Ark is founder, I believe, Rohan. So let's kick it off. Rohan, with an introduction to yourself would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Matt, and thanks guys for inviting Ark over to the series as a bonus episode. Really glad to be here. And a bit about myself. I'm the founder and CEO at Ark, and at Ark, kind of like we are building a modular protocol to solve chain abstraction, and within chain abstraction, we are kind of like hyper focused on liquidity abstraction. And it's been kind of like a year that we have been like working on building abstracted solutions and building out these standards. And before this, I kind of like come from the account abstraction, gas abstraction relay background. So I used to lead growth and strategy at Bioeconomy earlier. And that's where kind of like I personally kind of like became very, very, super enthusiastic about, why, user experience, why seamless transactions, why, these onboarding things matter overall, for kind of like the overall adoption of Web3. I mean, like, we can build numerous DeFi applications in numerous consumer applications, but if, I am not able to kind of like onboard users who can simply use the application and onboarding is like still kind of like a very oversold concept, but after onboarding also people forget to kind of like focus on retention, that you also need to kind of like retain people. So I kind of like go by this quote that people come for the product but they stay for the experience, right?
Yeah,
So this
love
is
that.
kind of like the
100%.
mindset that kind of like we come with the entire team at Arc, and this is what we are building towards.
It's
Cool.
actually such
Sounds
a
good.
good it's such a good way to phrase it. They come for the product and stay for the experience, because in a bull market, rather, everyone comes in, right? We get all this attention from retail. People want to get in on the action, but as soon as something slows down and that kind of financial incentive goes away, you see just how difficult it is to go and take that next step in crypto, that people are just like, no, I'm out. All right. And they fold back. So I'm very
Yeah.
glad that you summed it up that way. Peter, I'd love a little intro on yourself, and a little bit about your background in the space too.
Yeah, so I'm Peter. I'm the co-founder and CEO of SEDA. And Rohan, before I dive into my background, I'd love to know, like, as a previous app builder on top of the stack, who is this sort of targeted towards? Is it like, people who are building applications and protocols that are like consumer focused, DeFi? What's sort of the target market for you guys right now?
Yeah, sure. So, you can think about Arc in two ways. The orchestration, kind of like APIs and kit that we have, it is kind of like focused more towards, people who are building any kind of consumer applications. Preferably, more about, like more like mega audience stuff, like like not protocols who are just like focused on power users, right? It's more of like end consumers, retail, social, GameFi, DeFi for masses, kind of like ICPs in that sense. And the core liquidity protocol that we are building, which powers the orchestration engine, is kind of like more focused towards anyone who's into liquidity business or anyone who's into TVL business, for example. We don't want to classify it as NFT, DeFi, GameFi, because these are use case level primitives, but we kind of like define on the tech stack, so or the product, how kind of like a product works. So if you are in a TVL business, if your solution or your protocol requires you to maintain TVL on a single chain or multiple chains, we might have a solution for you.
Cool. Yeah. We got started at like the very top of the application layer. We built the first app for derivatives on startups back in 2018, and that was built on top of Augur, Chainlink, and Maker. And we were one of the first applications to integrate DAI for trading experience. And what we found was that when we were building at the top of the infrastructure layer, the applications that we were building, we just couldn't see scaling to the mainstream, right? So this was sort of like predecessor to Polymarket with prediction markets, right? The type of application that we were trying to build with a specific niche use case. And that's what sort of brought us down the stack to start building towards Oracle infrastructure, because we were building it for ourselves, right? To kind of leapfrog what was available in the Oracle space at that time. And how we got started with SEDA is we basically had this Oracle product that we built for ourselves for sort of like our open market protocol. And then devs started reaching out and saying, hey, like this also is interesting for us. Can you also build something for us as well? And then we realized, like while we were building this infrastructure, that there's a need for oracles and sort of a need for faster, more advanced tech on the Oracle side. And that led us to build our first party Oracle, which was called Flux. And that grew from 0 in total value secured to over 3.5 billion in just around 8 weeks after we launched it. And so we became the second largest Oracle by TVS, but it still was with its biggest problem of how do we scale this to support a ton of different applications across a bunch of different standards and make it accessible, to any network or any builder or protocol. And so that's what brought us to build SEDA. And so SEDA is basically programmable Oracle infrastructure that you can essentially create any type of custom Oracle program that you'd like. So if you're a builder, let's say, an ARC that wants to build a DeFi application and they want to get access to price feeds, you can come and deploy an Oracle program in 90 seconds and be up and running with your Oracle feeds from, your custom data providers, whether it's, directly from exchanges or from professional data providers like Kaiko or Amber Data, whatever it may be. Or if you're looking for interoperability, and you're a developer building an application that you want to be able to source, liquidity from a bunch of different things, we can also help, on the intent side with settlement and execution as an Oracle with RPC data. So kind of the key culmination of all of this to SEDA is to build basically a settlement layer, for any type of data, any type of data feed. So that's sort of my background and how we kind of went all the way from the top of the stack building applications down to building core infrastructure now.
I think you hit some super cool points for both of you. And one of the big things I always find really interesting is this idea of scaling, right? Because people have been talking about scaling since I joined Web3 and probably years before any of us joined Web3, right? It's just this topic that no one seems to be able to solve. But I was going through your website and your docs earlier today, and obviously knowing SEDA's background, both projects are speaking very heavily to these two concepts, one being chain agnosticism, the other one being Omnichain. We just did our first hackathon for the chain abstraction hackathon with Particle Network yesterday, where we were building Omni oracles. I'm very, very curious about this design feature, right? So I'll throw to you first, Rowan. Why do you believe that building Omnichain tools is so important for devs right now? And kind of how did you get to that journey to go, this is the solution to scale?
Yeah, sure. I think I'll start with the journey, right? So, while we were fully deep into account abstraction and, we were talking to developers day in, day out, we kind of found two problems or two blockers that came again and again. One was that, post RAS, post Duncan upgrade, a lot of developers were either building on their own chains or they were building on newer chains, newer third-party chains, people who were building newer chains for their various use cases, right? And they wanted, XYZ infra on that chain ASAP, right? And, chain support, I'm sure, infra builders will agree is a nightmare. There is no magic formula to support, new state machines overnight. It has to go through the entire dev cycle, depends upon how heavy your solution is. So this is the first thing. And the second thing basically was that even when they were okay, we'll use smart accounts, okay, we'll use these new type of accounts, experience is fine, but my users are on EOA. So the problem of my users are not that they don't have smart accounts. The problem of my users are that they have funds on MetaMask or they have funds on Trust Wallet, right? So how do you make that transition happen? So actually before we kind of stumbled upon that on what we are doing is actually chain abstraction. We were building this API SDK for migration. So it was a very simple concept that you have a EOA, you have some funds in it, you'll use ARC, you'll migrate your entire EOA to a smart account. That smart account could be of any provider, but essentially this will make your onboarding easy. And then once you move to that state, whatever benefits you get from a smart account will be applicable to your experience as well overall, right? This is where we started, and we slowly realized that essentially what we are doing, we are essentially moving funds from point A to point B, and that point B is basically a smart account in our use case, right? And when we kind of zoomed out and we spoke to more people, then we discovered that okay, we were kind of digging, and we only have discovered natural gas till now, but if we keep deeper, we are sitting on a crude oil problem, right? So that's where we discovered this, that okay, movement of money is not the problem, but where the money lies or where the fund lies and how do you orchestrate into it in a very seamless experience is a larger problem. It's like not just limited to migration of smart accounts. So kind of like this was the journey, and this kind of like also inspires the entire Omnichain thesis, or the entire chain abstraction thesis that we guys have. So I like to answer this question by a very simple question, that like open question to community and both of you guys, that if you have to count, like in your active memory, how many chains can you count? Like I can count Ethereum, Polygon, Base, Optimism, Arbitrum, like like that. Probably, what is your number, like high level?
For being in marketing, I work with logos all the time. Maybe I'd get 10 if you let me think about it for 10 seconds.
Yeah, probably 25 or 30, right? Probably even like if you think hard, right?
Yeah.
So my point is that we all know that there are at least 300 400 state machines or chains out there, right? But all of us still just remember 30 or 40 of it. That's it, right? We don't know any other chains, or we don't actually remember them because we don't interact with them daily. So this is what chain abstraction is all about, that as a user you do not need to know if you are on Ethereum, or if you are on chain B or chain C or chain D. You should know that okay, I am a gambler and I want to use Polymarket to do some kind of trade, and doesn't matter if Polymarket exists. I just go connect my wallet, or whatever onboarding process Polymarket has, and I'll just use the application. Same if I have to like print meme coins, or if I have to build meme coins, I'll go and do it the same way on fund.xyz, or fund.money, and things like that. So this is how kind of like we think about it, where the true kind of experiences where as a user you're not concerned about which chain you are on, where your funds are, what wallet you are on. So it's kind of like amalgamation of all the abstractions together, and this umbrella is called the chain abstraction. So this is how we kind of think it.
Really cool. I'd love to understand, like, for builders that are like deploying. So I think this is a pretty interesting sort of thesis that's emerging at the moment. And we talked about this in an earlier C.A.M.P episode with Particle Network, about how essentially when you start to use solvers and intents to basically fill users' orders and transactions behind the scenes, you actually create demand on the cheapest chain where solvers can actually get repaid their funds, right? So if a user has their funds on Ethereum or Solana and they want to use an application wherever, right, they could go through Arc and have this, intent settled, and have all of this sort of gasless, user experience, and totally extracted user experience. But then actually the demand is driven to the layer that's actually the cheapest to settle on, right? And so from my understanding from your documentation, Arc is a roll-up in L2. And then the idea is basically to have a lot of that settlement happen on your roll. Is that correct?
Yes.
Cool. And so sort of from your understanding, or your sort of like positioning in the market, do you see that like a lot of the sort of transactions will eventually flow through Arc, and then you just have like a settlement to ETH as like an L1? What sort of like your thesis there? Because I think it's quite a new dynamic that's emerging now, that a lot of the value is actually going to go towards these chains that are actually settling for solvers and intents.
Yeah. You mentioned this concept where that we kind of like generate demand, and the settlement kind of like happens on the cheapest chain, right? And if we kind of like think about settlement, what is settlement actually, right? So settlement basically is establishment of trust, that for example, if I pay, let's say, $1,000 to Matt, and and as Peter, you trust Matt, and Matt tells you that I have received the money, we are settled, right? And since this kind of trust does not exist, that's why we need state machines, and immutability and verifiability, to achieve the level of trust and immutability, and to kind of like do these transactions. So how we're thinking about it is that uh, we don't want to kind of like take custody of the funds. So And we are also kind of like thinking about the solver systems in a different way. We don't kind of like think that Dutch auction mechanisms are the best way, because Dutch auction mechanisms kind of like drive everyone to like zero, right? Everyone outcompetes everyone, and there is not much of a difference, right? All the solvers in the end have funds on all the chains. Everyone is fast, or everyone is sufficiently fast, to be honest, right? So there is no real data point that differs between two solvers except cost. And if you keep having Dutch auctions, then running a solver is a non-economical business. And that is why we see that people are building solver networks, but the solver on that network is a centralized solver that they run themselves. You'll not find a lot of projects who have a lot of solvers, right? Probably a few exceptions will exist, but most of the projects are kind of like running their own solvers even when they have solver networks, right? Because running a solver historically has been a not so very profitable business, because Dutch auctions drive the prices down to almost zero, and it's a bloodbath overall. So how we are thinking about it is that we feel that protocols will kind of have like certain specific solvers that will function for them. So in my head, this feels like that GMX will have their own solver, Camelot will have their own solver, will have their own solver. And when I say their own, it doesn't mean that they will run their own solver, they will bootstrap their own liquidity, and everyone will build their own solver. No, it basically means that solver is just a third party counterparty kind of agent that interacts with your users on a multi-chain scenario, while you as a main protocol focus on building your main application on your home chain or your app chain. So for GMX app chain, like their home chain is like Arbitrum, right? And anyone who's building an app chain, this is a DYDX, their core logic lies on their own chain. So it doesn't matter whatever state machine you are on. Essentially, if you're on a state machine, we feel that it would make tremendous sense for you to have a counterparty that acts as your own solver to interact with your users and do whatever things with them. So this kind of like is a very powerful primitive, because this allows full autonomy and full control to the protocol, while they can do the stuff with zero overhead. And price discovery, solver discovery mechanisms also kind of like can be changed. You do not need Dutch auction mechanisms in this kind of a model. So this is the direction that we are building towards in ARC. And to kind of like complete the loop around the question you asked, so how we think is that all serious protocols will kind of like work in this way. And tomorrow, arc might be the coordination layer, but arc is not the necessary coordination layer. I mean, like the solver systems is not logged to our layer. So if you, let's say as a protocol, kind of like run a solver, and you function for a year, and then after a year you would like that, okay, for whatever reason a different model makes sense to you, then your solver can basically settle on that chain. You do not need to settle on arc chain. So inside the stack as well, I mean, like outside, everyone is modular, right? We are modularly compatible to SEDA is modularly compatible to us, but within arc's stack also we are modular on a layer level.
Can
Super
you
cool.
help me
Go ahead.
understand the design function here, right? From what I understand from what you're just saying, Arc connects basically this Omnichain concept by having solvers, right? As long as there's a solver to complete the user order to whatever chain, that chain can be accessed via Arc, right? Does that mean that Arc is restricted by the amount of solvers? How do you see this playing out? Because I see this kind of model across a lot of different projects that we've talked to on C.A.M.P, and I always wonder, like, in theory, this works really, really well, but how are the solver markets going to play out? Because we still need to make being a solver attractive, right? And there are some toolings like Everclear is making it attractive for rebalancing and making that an easier concept, but there's also this race to zero. And then there's kind of like this race to go, well, I'll be hyper specialized and I'll do all these long-tailed L2s and I'll go to all these new networks and I'll be the only one there, but more people are going to want to do that. So how do you see kind of the evolution of the solver network that's so important for this Omnichain thesis to play out to be truly Omnichain, being every chain included?
Got it. So there are a lot of examples that we can relate to from Web 2 world over here. So this might not be like exact analogy of what we are doing, but this will help kind of like explain solver networks, right? So if you think about Amazon Prime, not the video, but the logistics, Amazon Prime. So how Amazon Prime basically works is that Amazon asks a vendor to keep whatever goods or stuff they are selling in their warehouse so that they can deliver it ASAP. If they source from your warehouse, they cannot deliver it very fast, right? They have to like source from your warehouse and deliver it to the customer, right? So essentially, if you think about this entire paradigm of why Amazon Prime as a service is useful and successful, it does not tell the customer to switch their houses. It does not tell that, if I have to purchase from vendor A, then I need to be in this house. If I have to purchase from vendor B, I need to be in this house. Or if I have to purchase from vendor C, I need to be in this house. This is how Web3 works right now, right? If you need to, transact on Base, you need to have a wallet that is on Base. You need to have funds on Base. So basically, as a user, I'm shifting addresses. Analogy of Prime. So the role of Amazon Prime is that as a user, I can stay wherever I want. I have my location which is fixed, and globally all the vendors can serve me where I am at the speed I want, at the cost I want, with the convenience I want, right? So technically, Amazon Prime is not fronting the goods. It's not like that you order from Amazon and Amazon basically delivers you the good and then sources it from the vendor, right? It's just a service provider in the between that makes the system so easy that it works, right? So this is how we are thinking about it. And a second analogy over here would be that if we have kind of like I'm sure we all must have traded stocks at some point of time in their lives. So if you take NYSE or any exchange as an example, you don't buy Tesla stocks from Elon Musk, right? You don't call him up that, hey Elon, I want 10,000 worth of Tesla stocks, then you wire it to me, right? You trade with NYSE. So NYSE is the counterparty for the end user who's the trader, and for the company who is kind of like selling or buying their own stocks, right? So they act as a counterparty. So imagine if Tesla had to kind of like deal with all the users individually, it's a nightmare, right? And individually they have to deal with all the customers within US, outside US, different geographies, different currencies, different custodians, different settlement banks, right? So in today's world, all the protocols who are struggling with multi-chain expansion are a Tesla to us, right? And we want to be the NYSE for them, right? So that they don't struggle, they can settle on their home environment. If you are a US based company, NYSE is their home environment. If you are an India based company, then probably BSC is your home environment, and similarly throughout the globe. So we want to be that product which helps you achieve that, and you focus on your main stuff, and while everything is managed by us. And how we see solver systems evolving is that two kinds of solvers will exist. One are hyper generalized solvers. Today's example of this would be Wintermute, right? Folks like Wintermute and other large market makers are generalized solvers. They can do APC activities on 10 chains, and then they can do rebalancing in the background because they have those systems made up, right? So these solvers will always exist because generalized solvers help you do things at a fair price, and will also help you do things on a long tail level, right? It's very unprofitable for a specialized solver to run on long tails, because long tails will not have that much of order volume, so it's not sustainable. It will make sense for generalized large solvers to expand on long tail first, and slowly as the volume increase, people will specialize. So second category of solvers that we see is specialized solvers. Now the interesting question is, who are these solvers, right? Is it us? Yes. In some cases, protocols will run their own solvers. Is it VCs? Yes. Is it people who are staking, folks like Lido, Rocket Pool, or Ethereum validators, Bitcoin miners, who have liquidity? So we see that these are like 3-4 ICPs who are very very kind of like strongly positioned to build their own solvers, and strongly incentivized to also have their own solver systems. And our role at ARC is to make it easy for these people to build these solvers, so that they get full customizability, they get full autonomy, they get that full control on I can do whatever with my solver that makes sense from a personal protocol. But still all the solvers coordinate, and still I don't have the onus of liquidity management. So this is kind of like the direction that we have, and this is kind of like the vision that we're thinking about.
Yeah, really cool. I like the example of like, basically offloading inventory management to third party, so you don't have to like basically rely on maintaining like your own gas balances and stuff like that. With SEDA, we as an Oracle, we support RPC data routing as well, and so we're working with a few interoperability protocols to help create like a decentralized route for data transfer, for settlement execution for solvers. And I think one thing that I think we have like a shared thesis right now at SEDA, which is that for the most popular routes, it's going to be like a race to zero, right? So if you're talking about solving on a chain like Ethereum or Solana, there's going to be a ton of competition and hyper specialized companies that probably have like a ton of bandwidth and sort of server power to sort of be competitive and take a loss and kind of like take a maximum sort of place within that market. And then you have like niche chains, right? Like you might have a chain spin up on Caldera that's building some obscure use case for watch trading, let's say, right? And they want to create their own in-app experiences and all this other stuff, so they have their own role to do so. And then there probably isn't going to be a bunch of solvers that want to be competing for that one network. So then you have, like you said, these protocols might run their own solver, right, rather than relying on like a solver network. I sort of view solvers as actually like the most critical piece in all of this chain abstraction sort of stack, because they essentially have the power to centralize transactions, right? So I'm curious how you think about this, like, for your developers into the future, when they're building on more sort of like niche chains or things like that. Like, how do you sort of see this playing out when solvers may sort of centralize where only one project's running a solver? Do you view this as like taking away from the decentralization of the actual settlement of the chain because the transaction is relying on a solver, as an example?
Yeah. So that's a very interesting question, because all of us builders, at all points of time, we are trying to balance between permissionless, decentralization, and all these ethos that Web3 has. So how we think about it is that before we decentralize any system, we need to think that why decentralization matters for the specific system, right? So if you talk about solvers, um, there are kind of like out of every other risk, like the major risk is censorship, right? That if I am running my own solver as a protocol, then I can censor users who cannot or maybe can use my protocol, right? So in that sense, how we have done it, that we have decoupled solver permissions and solver access, right? Which means that anyone, everyone, or any protocol can kind of like build their own solver, but that does not mean that only they can run that solver instance. So that solver instance can be run by multiple people in the community. So like the same instance can be run by multiple people. So we are not claiming that the same solver will be run by 100 people. We don't know. I mean, like, it's too early to say that. For us also, and as an industry also within chain abstraction. But what we are saying is that we'll at least have 5 to 10 sufficient nodes who will be running similar solver structures, so that there is no censorship risk. That's one. And second, the liveness risk kind of like is also hedged, because solver systems are supposed to be live 24/7. So if my solver goes offline, then my trade is like cannot be settled, right? So to hedge both the risks, this model like works very best. And we have not found any other major risks around why decentralization would matter that much, apart from hedging these. So this is how we are thinking about it.
Yeah, I do think. Sorry, Matt, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I think SEDA is a pretty sort of core piece that we see with these other chain abstraction protocols, where we're essentially creating this execution layer, right? So I think this also takes the risk away from a lot of these solvers sort of manipulating transactions, because when a transaction is fired and is basically produced, then that also requires a settlement proof to show that that action actually happened. So if a user is trying to buy 1 ETH with 100 USDC, or let's not be that bearish, like 2,500 USDC for 1 ETH, then basically that action is only fulfilled to the solver if that action is taking place, and then the funds are released on the settlement layer for liquidity, and then the solver actually gets their tip once the user receives their ETH. And I think that's sort of like how we see this as like kind of a fraud protection proof in the back end, where you start to have kind of like permissionless and decentralized gut checks of like, hey, is this action actually happening? And if so, you can settle it. And if it doesn't happen, then there's very little risk, because even if there's one solver that's operating on a chain, we see it as, okay, that one solver has a decentralized backup that, it basically can't extract those funds unless the settlement is proved that the action actually happened on chain B in order to release funds on chain A. And I think this is and I think you guys probably have something similar with Axelar, built in with their message passing protocol. And I think this is sort of like a very cool way of building up a backstop, for security.
Yeah. I mean, like, you rightly pointed out that, this is how also we'll be thinking about this on, I mean, like, it's a very, hard decision choice on architecture level, because, we have to kind of like have some sweet spot, between atomicity and security, right? Atomicity at speed, security also, and how we kind of like settle in a way where optimistic confirmations also work, but we are not absorbing as much as risk, because chains can reorg, right? On the rebalance side. So we are also kind of like thinking in the same way, where we are trying to achieve a sweet spot between this trilemma. And XLR is kind of like of tremendous help, to ARC as a protocol, and we are kind of like using XLR's GMP, and we have enshrined support for XLR, within our stack.
I want to move the conversation along, because there's something else in your documentation that I really want to cover today, and it's another thing that we share between SEDA and ARC, which is actually super cool. There's so many points in terms of design principles, and the reason that I bring up design principles as the wording here is because I'm very bullish on projects that are baking in these concepts, whether that's an Omnichain, chain agnostic design, being able to give a tool across to a developer and say, use this to suit your use case, versus use this as I've dictated you to use it, or it's being built to use only one way, so you must use it that way. Kind of like some of the legacy tooling that suited the industry 4 or 5 years ago. In ARC's website, you use the term use case specific SDK, which could then also be argued in SEDA. We say like you can build an app specific Oracle, right? And we use this framing at the moment. It's like build use cases. Build data feeds for use cases, not use cases for data feeds, right? So I wanted to talk about this idea of use case specific. You're appealing to dApp builders, applications. What's the demand happening at the moment? What kind of developers are you getting in? What kind of like apps are being built, or the experiences do you see are going to come out of this concept of using use case specific SDKs?
Yeah. So when we say use case specific SDKs, and I mean, like, I'm sure when SEDA also says that you can design use case specific oracles, it basically means that the product can be customized to suit your specific requirements, right? Or the functionality can be customized to suit your specific requirements as a developer, as a protocol, right? So how we see this, in our chain abstraction sense, is that there's this funny concept where a lot of protocols promise that we will support everything for you, right? We will support 100 chains, 1,000 assets. You can do anything, anywhere, from any asset, any chain, any user, right? There are like so many any's that it's basically you can do everything, right? We don't feel it's the right approach, because that's not how we see that the world will work. How we see it is that as a protocol, let's say someone who's building a game, for example, right? Most likely they will not need access to 100 chains. They will have 4 or 5 specific ecosystems that are closer to them, that are closer to their ICP, that are closer to their audience, that makes sense for them, and they would want to focus more deeply on those ecosystems, onboarding for those ecosystems, versus using generalized solutions that give them through and through interoperability, right? So this is where the customization comes into play from the ARC side. If on a scale of 0 to 10 or a slider, we have like service support on basic chains, basic assets, to more chains, more assets. As a developer, you can customize. You do not want to pay for wholesome interoperability when you don't need that, because wholesome interoperability will slow the system down. If you only want interoperability with like 4 or 5 chains that matter to you, we can work very fast. But if you want general solutions, because if I want like 100 chains, then my state sync will become slower, because I have to index 100 chains at every point of time. right? So these trade-offs kind of like are very, very use case specific, and these are possible with Arc, and that is why we mention use case specific SDKs. So this is one way to think about it. The second way to think about it is about your user persona. So we support onboarding from direct exchanges like Coinbase, Binance, Bitfinex, OKX, etc. We support onboarding from ramps. We work with like MoonPay, Stripe, all of these good people, and then we also support onboarding from any other asset, any other chain, right? So it really depends upon your customer persona. If you need all the three flows, you have all the three flows. If you just need any one, you can have any one. If you need a combination of any two, you can have any two. So again, this might sound like that, as a developer, you have to kind of like do a lot of customization. It's not like that. It's a 4-line code, 10-minute integration. You can just pick and drop stuff that you need, or you can remove stuff that you don't need, and we're good to go.
This is what's
Cool.
super exciting, right? Because this idea of, we spoke with Enzo Finance, I think it was our second or third episode that we did on the series, and Connor from Enzo said something super cool. I forget the wording, but it was kind of this idea that you should just be able to ship over a weekend. And he was like referring to the Web 2 traditional development of being like, I have this idea. What are the tools I need? Here are the tools I need. Sweet, I'm using those, and I'm going to ship this product. And I think like as an industry, the more that I have these conversations with builders like yourself and talk with Peter, is Web3 kind of needs to replicate Web2 in a lot of ways. Like I think sometimes we get so honed in on like owning the tech and owning this space as ours, and putting these walls up is like, no, you can't come in, this is our walled garden. But they're rapidly coming down now, and developers are going, no, these features that we need, Omnichain, programmability, being able to just use a tool as you want, is just incredibly powerful, right? So I think that we're right on that cusp of consumer applications at a V1. I don't want to get too bullish because I also don't believe that we're just going to have a wave of apps tomorrow. But I think we're going to be able to start testing this theory and start putting these tools to test as well. And one thing that comes out of this conversation is this idea of like no longer having to think about chain specific requirements, not having to think, okay, where do I want to build first? Peter, this is something that you've talked to me a lot about, is like through your journey of being an app developer and then coming down the stack. How do you see that now, like builders not having, in terms of SEDA, like, and builders not having to choose what chain they're developing on? And what are the benefits of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that. Oh, go ahead, Rohan.
I was just sorry. I was just gonna add on the previous point that DevX is like super important. All of us like keep talking about user experience, end user usability, how we'll onboard the next billion users, but no one is gonna use your solution if it's taking a lot of effort or time to integrate that. People don't have that much time. In Web3, 3 months feel like a year. Things move so fast. Everyone has tight roadmap. No one has space. Like all the good teams who are worth working with in the sense of like supporting large use cases or building innovative projects. All of them have like super tight roadmaps, right? So you need to kind of like focus very, very heavily on DevX, that we should not be taking a lot of time away from the roadmap, and how can we like deliver fast. So there's this like race car framework also, that I can buy a Ferrari, but if I don't have a road to drive, then there's no point of buying a Ferrari, right? So I can optimize my product, but if I don't have a basic requirement like a road to drive it, then Ferrari and a cycle is the same, right? So cool, Peter, go ahead. Just want to
I think that's a great breakdown. I don't have much to add from that. I think it's just before, developers had to build where infrastructure tools are available, rather than like where they believe the most sort of like suitable community for them was. And I think that now developers are just able to build where they believe their user base is. And I think that's kind of the strongest argument for developers to build on a certain network. I think that there's a lot of also breakdown between like monolithic versus modular networks right now. You have monolithic networks, and I'm kind of like a generalization bear. Like I believe that like generalized platforms outside of Ethereum are kind of like doomed to fail. I think that Ethereum is the only network that has created like a generalized smart contract platform that doesn't really have like a major focus. And people might say it's DeFi, but in the reality, like there's just like a host of different applications being built and protocols. I think that if you look at a platform like Solana, they're really hyper focused on bringing a TradFi like experience to their users. So there's a lot of trading applications and things that need like very fast execution, like DPIM with Helium and other sort of like half crypto, half real world applications. But I feel like into the future, like you have like these modular networks, and if the monolithic networks aren't working for you, you can actually build your own, or build your own application on some of these modular networks, and then be able to get that infrastructure experience. And I think the biggest thing that was holding back us as an app developer, as an example, back in 2018 was we just didn't have the wallets, we didn't have the RPCs, we didn't have the explorers, or the indexers. And I think that now a lot of that tooling is ready for developers. And like Rohan said, it's in their scenario, it's 10 minutes. It's out of the box. You can go and grab whatever you need, leave out what you don't need, and deploy your application. And I think this really brings down the barrier to entry for these developers, but it also removes a lot of the moat from many of these networks because they don't have such a strong use case. So really, the developers are just building where they believe they're going to see the most traction for their protocol, rather than where they have the most infrastructure available, basically.
What does it mean that for like hyper specialized chains? Because if we move from this kind of monolithic, I mean, I'm from the idea that monolithic will still sit at the bottom there somewhere. Like these two worlds are always going to be merged. I don't think we're just going to rip them apart. But in the case for like Arc, right, we could argue that you're a hyper specialized roll up in what you guys are doing in a lot of ways. And then there's this thesis going around, right, like the app chain thesis, that applications are all just going to spin up their own roll ups, and we're just going to have hundreds, if not thousands, depends how bullish you want to get, of these chains. But what does that then mean if we spin up all these chains? How are we going to make them connected? Because the more app chains you spin up, the more solver networks you're going to have to do, the more kind of intent engines and pathways you're going to have to do. Like, are we constantly setting ourselves up to fail in this building system, or how do you see that playing out, Rowan? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question and an interesting take on that. So my take on that is that building app chains and rollups is not a tech problem or a tech decision. This is what I've found out talking to all the people who are doing that. It makes tremendous sense on a business side for a company to have their own block space, to have their own state machine, right? And be it like owning revenue, owning transactions, owning sequencer based revenue systems, or order flow, or owning token economics, right? So all these kind of like things make tremendous sense for people to have their own app chain. Because like when people tell me that we are building app chains because we are not able to scale on some other chain, that's like half true. There are chains out there who can scale to like 20, 30, 50, even 100 tps, right? And we don't have apps that require 100 tps right now, right? So the infra that you are demanding is just kind of like a narrative. It's not a problem statement, right? So my honest take on this is that it's more of a business driven decision making that is happening overall in web3. Technically we do not need so many chains, I agree to that fact, but that's not how the world works. People and developers and all the projects will optimize for their ecosystems, will optimize for whatever is best suited to make their project sustain, right? And now it's very hard to say if we are setting ourselves up for kind of like a doomsday or not. But how I see this is that yes, a lot of roll-ups will exist, a lot of app chains will exist, but I still feel that a lot of consolidation will also take place, right? Because if you don't have enough user base or enough transactions or enough order flow to justify your block space, then your block space is just gonna be empty. You have a chain, you don't have a chain, doesn't matter. You're like just there, right? So by the virtue of that fact, I personally feel that we will see a lot of consolidation happening. And till we see consolidation happening, solver networks and GMP solutions will keep coming up, because there will always be some chain who's not yet supported. There will always be some asset who's left out, right? So there will always be opportunity to build in that direction. But as we progress in the future, I do see consolidation happening. And I don't know the number, but let's assume like I do feel that there will be like 20, 30 chains that will do the major order volume, and will have the majority of the routes. And now the question is that the moat basically becomes that who has the liquidity. The moat is not if you have support, if you have order flow, or if you have routing between those two state machines. The moat is that how large of a order flow can you handle.
Yeah, it's a
And
good
at what cost, and at what security guarantees, of course.
I'd love to know, like, how do you guys think about success for Arc in terms of app builders? Do you more see, like, do you believe that if Arc becomes like a home for users and developers to access a bunch of sort of networks and applications on a bunch of different chains and combine that into one experience? Or do you more define this as like all the applications should build on Arc because you have the best tooling, to be sort of like this omni-chain entry point for users? Like, how do you sort of think about like this sort of breakdown?
Yeah. So kind of like, if I have to think about Arc, from a very high level, 30,000 feet view probably, then we are in the business of, or we are in the direction of moving value essentially. Do it via orchestration, do it via solvers, etc., etc. Essentially, we are moving value from point A to point B, right? And for us, the North Star is basically the transaction volume that we do. That's the only North Star metric that we kind of like follow, because everything, chain support, revenue, number of partnerships, number of customers who are integrating it, number of users impacted, number of wallets impacted, number of assets impacted, everything revolves around the same KPI. So the way we define success for us is that how much of the order flow or the order volume of the total market are we doing as a company, or Arc is doing as a company. So let's say tomorrow, if we are in overall, between all the consolidated popular networks, let's say we are not we, like we as an industry are, let's say, settling, I don't know, maybe $1 billion a day, just a random example, right? Then our success metric is that what is the percentage of the order volume that we are settling via Arc, right? And this is what we are kind of like trying to achieve. I don't have a hard number for it, but yeah, I mean, like, this is how we think about it.
Cool, makes sense.
Peter, I wanted to ask you on what Rowan was speaking about before. I'm talking about this kind of idea of like rolling up heaps of chains and things. I mean, Arc's kind of more up in the stack, right? Sitting under the application layer in orchestration. SEDA's right down the bottom in foundational infra. What does it mean for a foundational infra, especially around data, if we keep adding in all these chains? And this is to go full circle in the conversations we come around the hour, like this idea of scalability. You keep plugging in chains, you keep adding demand for TPS, demand for block space, demand for like solvers to verify their transactions. There's just more demand. How are you thinking about that as an Oracle builder to be able to scale? What kind of design principles are going to be the solutions to these problems?
Yes, I mean, I think how we built SEDA is specifically in a way that can be scalable in any sort of future like this. How most oracles work today is they pick certain chains that they want to deploy their infrastructure to, and then they have to point their sort of validators, or like guardian network, as some of them call it, to this network. They have to then set up all the contracts for any feeds they want to deploy, and then most of them are focused on price feeds, right? So they're application specific. So to scale this to, like, let's say 100 chains is impossible. Most are struggling to support over 5 or 10 in a meaningful way with their entire feed library. And when I see feed library, I mean 250 to 500 feeds maximum, from some of the largest oracles that are trying to do this now. With SEDA, just from a couple of our data providers alone, we'll be able to support over 20,000 feeds right out of the box, on any asset, right, across like the top 20,000 tokens within crypto. And I'm just speaking right now about price feeds, right? That doesn't include RPC data, real world assets, anything else. And so we designed SEDA as like a general purpose-built layer for data. And I think that taking this design principle and flipping it, instead of putting our oracle on every single chain, we make our oracle accessible from every chain. And what that does is that allows us to build all of our core infrastructure, house all of our security in one commingled area on our network, our purpose-built L1, and then instead just make that L1 accessible, using a very simple solver and prover network, that we've built out. And so to scale to a new chain, the question isn't really like, can we support it? The question is, will there be value from these new chains that will be, demanding this data, right? So as long as there is a solver that's willing to be run, and I mean, solvers, let's say they're probably gonna be $5 to $10 to run a solver to SEDA chain per month. So, if a protocol wants to deploy, a rollup and they can't afford, $5 or $10 to operate a solver like themselves, I mean, we're probably talking about the wrong problem here. So as long as there's an economic value that they have a demand for this data, they can access it. The real question is going to be, at what point do we kind of go into this sort of heat death of modularity, where we expand so much that there isn't enough value to actually justify these networks. But I think what Rohan said is, we're living in a world where people will find ways to create value for their network and find specializations that will bring in users. And I think there's one sort of saying from the Coinbase team that we've heard before, in our conversations with them as backers, that they see sort of the modularity ecosystem as you'll continue to see more capital flowing into the top of the stack, at the sort of monolithic, Solana, Ethereum, et cetera layer, and that'll slowly trickle down into these more niche specific use cases. And it's kind of like having a master Reddit forum and then having subreddits that pop up, right? So as a use case in niche is identified that requires its own consensus and justifies a business case, then you'll launch your own network to capture that value and continue to make money from that block space demand, et cetera. So I think that's kind of how we look at it. Like, we're ready for it, but let's see. I don't think there's going to be 50,000 rollups in the next 5 years, but there could be a case where we might have 2,000 to 3,000 application specific rollups that are building for a very niche use case, or even protocols that are building on top of one specific layer that's hyper specialized, like ARC, to get this demand.
I just realized something super cool about having you both on this call, right? As you were talking there, Peter, it's so clear that you've come from the app layer down and then built your own Oracle, and then gone, hey, this needs fixing. I need to build something that's even going to solve all these problems I'm running into. And Rowan, you've come from Biconomy, was one of the early places you started. Maybe even before that we didn't hear, but you've come from smart accounts, and then you've come to build ARC, which is kind of like the missing piece for a lot of smart accounts, as well as this idea of orchestration across chains. So flipping back to that kind of concept, that are we setting ourselves up for failure? Well, I guess no, in a lot of ways, because our builders, like you guys, are going through the journey of building the tools and going, no, this doesn't work. With all these updates, we need to now do this, and then now we have ARC, and now we have, SEDA, which are both new paradigms in the industry for orchestration and data respectively. It's super bullish, and this is why we do these calls. This is why we do these series. Before we wrap up at the end of the hour, Rowan, this is your opportunity to give the spotlight on ARC, a little bit of a shill, maybe some cheeky alphas, always appreciated, but not obliged. What's happening at the ARC community? How can people get involved?
Yeah, sure. Just to also, add more context, before Biconomy, I was in investment banking, JP Morgan. So I come from, the finance IB, world. I've seen that, to some extent. And before that, I was completing my education. I'm a CS engineer. So kind of like, CS engineer turned banker, turned crypto enthusiast turned founder. Kind of like has been my journey. And kind of like it helps me, see those, patterns between how, you can mix tech, finance, DeFi, as well as, infra overall, right? So, and, that's why, kind of like, we are approaching the solid systems in a different way. We are also borrowing, things that have worked at tremendous scale from Web 2, right? And about ARC, I think we we are in a very interesting time space right now, where the orchestration is already live. If you are like looking to onboard users from exchange or on ramps or any popular chain and any popular asset, you can just have a 4-minute, like 4-line code, 10-minute integration with ARC. We are already live. We support 25 plus chains. You can like have verified links, you can have a widget, you can have APIs, or whatever you want to support. We are kind of like a headless API, and we support iframes, so do not need to be like, it doesn't matter if you're built on React, you're built on Flutter, you're built on Android, you're built on iOS. We will go through and through. And on terms of the orchestration, this is like how we are thinking about it, and this is how you can get involved right now. Like, you can join our Discord, you can join our TG community, you can come talk to us. We are one of the few companies who have an open calendar link on our website and everywhere, you see on the socials. So, anyone, if you just want to like speak to us, not even like use the service and just jam out stuff, we're still happy. Please use that link, reach out to us. And on the core protocol side, we have a lot of alpha coming in soon. So we are working with large tier 1 projects that everyone has heard about, and we're targeting testnet Q4. So we'll be kind of like launching a lot of community involvement campaigns soon, so that we can also make community a part of the overall protocol. So I'd say that that's kind of come out soon. So yeah, just stay tuned on that front.
It's super exciting, really, because a lot of the projects that we speak to, SEDA included, we all have that same sentence. We're speaking to a lot of tier 1 projects that you all know, and it's all coming out soon. I feel like it's a race to Q4, like a collaborative race, because we're all solving different parts of the stack. But it's super exciting with the projects that are involved. Not just us building new projects, but those sort of legacy projects that are going to get an expansion or an upgrade, if you like, by using these new tools that are coming through from basically all the projects that we've spoke to here on the C.A.M.P series. Peter, before we wrap up, I'll throw to you as well. What's going on in the SEDA camp?
Yeah, so as you can see, we've all been growing mustaches at the SEDA team. Everyone that can grow a mustache. So that's
appreciate
the first,
it, Rowan, too, as well. You grew one today.
But no, I mean, we've been cooking. We have our DevNet with data proxies and a lot of Oracle programs starting to go live. So we just kicked off the Encode Hackathon yesterday. Jasper gave a presentation. If you missed that, you can check it out, the recording. I believe it's going to be posted on our socials soon, or is already live. I lost track of that link. But right now we are sort of in the final stretch of our DevNet. So we are getting ready to launch version 0.4 of our DevNet, which will be sort of the last step before we can just start working on optimization and performance. And so over the next month, we'll basically start to switch gears towards getting ready for the audit for mainnet. Just kind of like working on getting block time down and stress testing the network, right? So I think there's going to be a lot of exciting developments on DevNet over the next few weeks, and then pushing to a stable version of testnet over the next month or so, and getting ready for the mainnet release and adoption. And so we're super excited. We're working with a lot of large partners to kind of create these first Oracle specific use cases and Oracle programs. So we have a few that are getting ready to go live on interoperability, and a couple that are in development for chain abstraction and more general purpose price feed Oracle programs. So we're super excited at the SEDA team. It's kind of like pins and needles, just waiting to get basically live. So we're all super excited.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think SEDA is looking for a lot of things happening in Q4. Arc obviously got a lot of things happening in Q4. Everclear, who we spoke to on the series, they've just gone to mainnet beta. Particle Network coming out next week. I believe they have their they go live publicly with their universal account as well. One Balance is still cooking. All the projects that are building towards chain abstraction. Maybe Q4 is the big kind of pinnacle moment, and then we kick off 2025 with the first kind of real use cases. I mean, Socket have just put out theirs as well. Arcana, actually, it's all coming back. There's so much happening in the space. Make sure you jump into the SEDA Discord if you want to get involved and participate in our network. If you're interested in getting into Arc's community programs that'll be coming out soon, jump into their Discords as well. This is the wrap up for the C.A.M.P series. Rowan, it's a pleasure to have you as our final guest on the series. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys. And yeah, chain abstraction is the new attraction.
100%. Peter, always awesome. A pleasure to have you here as well.
Ron, Matt, thank you so much for the time, and great to chat.
Thanks, guys.
Talk soon.
Yeah, thanks for having us here. Yeah, see you guys. Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.